Good evening and welcome to Pressing Issues. Today is Sunday, March 14th, 2021. I am your host, Jason Diffendahl, here for another episode of talking about everything that's going on in the news in the Walt Disney community, as well as Universal and some other things, and your weekly rant. But before we get started on my rant for the day, or one of them, I need to introduce my illustrious panel for today. We have Shannon.
Sivako!
Shannon just got back from Walt Disney World and is going to tell us all about her trip. We have Brian.
Hey, everybody.
And we have Matt.
Congaloosh, everyone. Let's have a great show tonight.
And just a bit of warning first. Matt's wife is expecting a baby any minute now. And so if you see Matt run off camera for some reason, we may be down to 3 for the evening, and that will explain it. But the reason I said that is because I have to tell the funny story. So this was way back in 2008 when Tom and I were doing the WW News Today podcast. 2008 was probably was episode 40 something ish. And my wife was due. And at one point, so we're in the middle of recording, and then at one point, I'm like, hey guys, I think I have to go. And they're like, why? And I'm like, my wife just went into labor. I'm like, can we continue this later? Tom loves telling that story. But so it's not unprecedented that in the middle of a podcast, somebody goes into labor and the podcaster has to run off.
And you told me Tom let you go?
He let me go. I promised to come back as soon as I could, but he did let me go. He was much nicer back in 2008.
Yeah, I'll text my wife to let her know that she's probably due. She's probably going to go into labor while we're on the show.
There's a 2-hour window where it's very likely to happen. Yeah. If not, it's not going to happen for like a week. But yeah. All right. So let's see. Shannon, you just got back from a trip to Walt Disney World. How long were you there?
About a week.
A week. Okay, good. So that's at least.
I stretched it. Long weekend.
That's all right. So that's a week is good for at least 3 rants, and 5 complaints and 7 funny stories. That's your quota for tonight.
I feel like I have much more than that, so it's going to be a challenge.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Oh, wow.
That's good. Let's see. And so what else we're talking about tonight? Well, some of the parks in California are starting to reopen with a taste of Universal happening. All of our coverage on that is on the website. And then the Mobile Magic, which is this new thing that's, I don't know whether it's good or not. We'll see. But we'll talk about that. But I want to get to Shannon first and hear all about your trip, especially the Food and Wine Festival and everything.
Flower and Garden. Flower and
Garden. Look, I'm allergic to the flowers, and I'm ready to sneeze just saying it.
Yes.
Let's start with that, and you give us a play-by-play of your whole trip, all of the good and mostly the bad is, I think, what we want to hear.
Yeah. Well.
You can save the good until the end, because the last 15 minutes we do a positive thing. So save the 1 or 2 good things that happened over the course of the week until the end.
That's perfect. I have my rant set up that way to end on 2 happy notes. So I really wanted to talk about the comparison of this trip and the trip before that, both COVID trips. So I went down tail end of August, beginning of September. That was my first pandemic trip to Disney, and I got that sweet spot like right before things started to get a little busier. So I really enjoyed that luxury. Now, I noticed some very glaring differences between that trip and this trip, and not just in terms of the crowd levels, but in terms of mask compliance, complying with the queue lines back in September. Everyone really followed the rules. At least that's what I felt anyway. In terms of the mask, the only place I really saw people not complying was a Saturday night at Disney Springs, which is probably to be expected with the locals. But the parks never had a problem. This trip, I went to Magic Kingdom on a Monday, midday, thinking it was going to be great, maybe hit some rides. I walked in and Main Street, I'm like, okay, this is fine. I turned the corner into Tomorrowland, and the sheer number of people waiting for their mobile orders at Cosmic Rays was absolutely bananas. If you're going anytime soon, thinking that things are going to be walk-ons, everyone's distancing, it's not going to happen. That ship has sailed and gone, and wait till you get your vaccine if you're still nervous about crowds. Same thing can be said when I rounded the corner all the way to Pecos Bills. They need to figure something out with opening. Casey's, Tomorrowland Terrace was closed. The lunching pad was closed. I ended up waiting 15 to 20 minutes just for a pretzel. It was absolute insanity. I think it has reached the point where Disney needs to start opening more of their counter service locations, because the people are here and they're only going to be more in the coming weeks. So that was number one. Number two, the festivals, Flower and Garden, yeah, same thing there. And it really felt almost normal because there were so many people eating their treats and snacks that you saw probably more people without masks than with masks. That's what I felt anyway. And even my husband, he doesn't go every trip, but he'll come probably every other trip. And he felt like it was more crowded than when we take our normal trip, no pandemic, usually in the fall time. So personal preference, but I didn't really care for any of the food at Flower Garden. I know some things got rave reviews. It just must not have been my food type. I don't know if anyone else has felt the same way. So
what did you have that you didn't like? Like what were the top three worst things you had?
I got the ham and cheese pretzel from Germany, and it was made in the morning, and it was just stale. But when it's that hardened cheese that had melted 5 hours ago. The lobster salad was pretty decent at Citrus Blossom. And then everything else just honestly didn't appeal to me, so I didn't try a whole lot. But I can go back in my photos maybe later if we talk about it again. In general, transportation, I found that taking the bus, I've mentioned this before on prior streams, I'm someone who uses Magical Express. I'm someone who uses the buses. I don't rent a car. However, it sounds like Disney's going to force me to do that next year. They have not increased bus service. I felt like that anyway. This was actually, compared to my last trip, I had to wait 2 bus cycles, which really stinks when it is 20 minutes between buses, because they're only limited to capacity on their buses. Now, something, I was hesitant to mention this, but I'm going to, because I know we're just all so sick and tired of hearing of it, but we can't get enough. The Harmonious barges, I can't, see, the thing is, I've seen these on live streams. I've seen these on blogs for the last several months. And it's hard for me to even describe to you, if you haven't been there yet, how big they look in person. I was astounded by the size and the fact that with the naked eye you can see all the inner workings, and it's really, it adds to the eyesore. And most importantly, it made World Showcase feel a whole lot smaller. It's kind of like a cluttered room in your house. You can't have too much, or it's going to take away from that feeling like you're traveling around the world.
That's a good way to explain it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was, and the fact that there's only 3 of 5, and I did see the videos from the other day of the water feature. and I want to give Disney the benefit of the doubt that they're going to figure that out with the wind blowing. I'm at a loss of words. One last note on Epcot, Ratatouille. I was standing there enjoying a baguette. I just like a plain baguette from the bakery. They are amazing. I highly recommend, with a glass of champagne. And I was saying to my husband, I was like, "Oh, this attraction is the opening is imminent." I really thought it was actually going to be open, while we were here. Wrong. But my thought on that is, I feel this sense of nervousness. Like, I need to be there when it opens, because I rode Rise probably 2 months after it opened. It was January 2020, I believe, that I rode it for the first time. I got to see the beauty of those cannons working. I also was very lucky that I had a flawless experience from the second my boarding group was called. I did not get pulled. The ride did not go down. It was the most beautiful experience of my life, probably. So the point I'm making is, I feel like if I wait a whole year to go on Ratatouille, I'm probably going to miss something, and the experience is going to be not as great.
You may be okay, simply because there's not really any moving parts on that attraction. So there won't be anything like cannons that are supposed to move that don't. I don't think there's a lot. Put it this way: there's a lot less to break on Ratatouille than there is on Rise.
That's to be determined. We'll see about that. And the last thing I want to complain about, I went to Enchanted Rose for the first time. I just wanted to go. And I was so annoyed because, first of all, the Grand was dead. I was so happy that the pianist was still there, but I'm still heartbroken by the Grand Floridian Society Orchestra. And I actually double-checked my phone because Grand Floridian is open for everyone, correct? Not just DVC?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It was dead. There was nobody in that lobby, and it was only, 6 o'clock. Everyone was in the Enchanted Rose. I wanted to sit in the bar area, but all the tables were full. So I was like, okay. So I wanted to go in that room that actually has the Beauty and the Beast decor, that really beautiful room. It was closed. So I got shoved into this dark green room with a forest wallpaper, drinking my espresso martini, which was delicious, but I was very bitter about that. Now I'll end on my two positive notes. Number one, I am very happy. Yacht Club actually honored not one but two of my room requests. I don't know if you've stayed at Yacht Club recently, any of you guys, but the last few times I've stayed and there's a connecting door, it's as if the people are in the room with you. You can hear everything that you're saying. It's really horrendous ever since they renovated those rooms a few years ago. So they gave me a non-connecting room, which was great, and a king bed, which are far and few between at Yacht Club. So really appreciated that, number one. Number two, a California Grill. So I went for my birthday. Best birthday ever, my 30th. And the free dessert was funfetti cake. And let me tell you, it was some of the most delicious funfetti cake. And the reason why this is a big deal is because a few years ago, I went. It was another special occasion. I actually believe it was the day after we got married down there. And they gave us a free dessert, and it was like crystallized ginger. It was horrendous. I can't even believe that a chef would put that out. But anyway, free dessert, California Grill, funfetti cake. Go get yourself a special occasion. And that's all I have for now. Thank you for letting me rant.
Very good. Well, thank you for all of that. So, I think your how much was your martini at the Enchanted Rose? Was it over $20?
No.
No? Okay.
I think 15. No, but I said my husband got an old fashioned, and obviously.
Yeah. So I think the Enchanted Rose is I don't know what the allure is. Like, if you can sit at a window, you have a fantastic view. If you don't sit at a window and you're like in that dark corner like you were, it's like what's the allure of this place? I don't know. I don't get it. But anyway, yeah, I see where you're coming from with the chain of rows for sure. I'm glad the California Grill was good for you. I haven't been there in a long time. I will say the last time that I went to a super fancy restaurant at Walt Disney World, we went to Kappa. Kappa is on the roof of the Four Seasons Hotel. It's a steakhouse, not much unlike any of the other steakhouses on property, really. And we had probably the best meal on Walt Disney World property that I've had in several years. And the amazing thing about Kappa is it's actually not that expensive. I was very surprised at how reasonably priced Kappa is. And so, for example, last year, 2 years ago, I don't even know when it was, before the pandemic, I went to Flying Fish. And Flying Fish had a 36 or 32 or 36 ounce bone-in tomahawk, which has the bone that's like this big, right? And so it's designed for two people. And at Flying Fish, it's $150. But it is by far the best steak I've ever had. And at Flying Fish, you have to get sides or a la carte. But if you're going to Flying Fish, you're going to expect to pay $75 a person or more for your meal. So that's not unreasonable for a spectacular steak. We go to Kappa, and they have a 32-ounce tomahawk on the menu, and I want to say it was $89. And it was absolutely just as good as Flying Fish. I don't want to say it was better because it's been a little too long since I've been to Flying Fish, but the Flying Fish one was so good that I went to Flying Fish again a second time within a week. I was there for a week, and I went twice because the tomahawk was so good. Kappa's tomahawk was like $60 cheaper, and it was just as good. So I kind of was upset that Flying Fish hasn't reopened yet, but now I'm super satisfied that Kappa has the tomahawk, and I don't really need to go back to Flying Fish. I mean, I would, but everything at Kappa was spectacular. The service was amazing, as you might expect from a Four Seasons. They have the other thing that really struck me as pretty cool was they have a temperature check as you enter the lobby of the hotel. Mm-hmm. So not only at the restaurants like at Disney, they have a temperature check when you enter the hotel, which Universal had. I don't know if Universal still does, because I haven't been at a Universal hotel in a while. But Universal had temperature checks at the entrance to their hotels too. So Disney only has them at the entrance to the restaurants. Four Seasons has a temperature check at the entrance to the hotel, and it's not a temperature scan of your forehead. It's a thermal imaging camera. So you just have to walk through these ropes. You walk through the stanchions past the camera, and it does a thermal imaging of your body, and that's all you need to do. Which I thought was really nice, really cool. Somebody's not in your face with a little temperature gun, pointed at your forehead. So I, for sure, my experience at the Four Seasons was phenomenal. I would totally stay there if it wasn't like $600 a night. But if you're paying $600 a night to stay at the Contemporary, I would certainly highly recommend you give a shot to the Four Seasons, because it is, in all ways, shapes, and forms, superior to the Contemporary or even the Grand Floridian. In terms of the restaurants and the service and the staff. I can't say anything about the rooms, but everything else was spectacular. So
that was actually a contender. Eric Morton had recommended it. But
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, but maybe in the future when I have easier access to get there.
Yeah, that's the only problem with Kappa is you really can't get there with Disney transportation. You could certainly do an Uber or something like that, but yeah, it's it was. I would definitely go back to Kappa, for sure. So, let's see, and yeah, I haven't tried any of the Flower and Garden food, but I know there have been mixed reviews about a lot of things. Last week, Desi was on here and had the what did she have, the some kind of sliders at the World Show Place, and said they made her sick. I know that people in our group that went the first day and did all the live streaming and stuff had the whatever it was, the meatless poutine something, the like the meatless sausage poutine, and they thought that made them sick. So I think, to be completely honest, as the crowds come back, I see Disney getting back to their sort of old ways of serving like inferior, not freshly prepared food.
You're right.
Right?
Because Food and Wine, I did Food and Wine in September, and I thought the quality of the food was fantastic.
Absolutely.
And this time, I forgot to mention one very important thing. I purchased my spork, and I used it, and it was fantastic.
Your Spike the Bee spork.
Yes, I was so excited to get it, and I paid for it, and the guy forgot to give it to me at the register. I was like, yeah, excuse me, don't forget my spork.
I need it for that blood orange margarita.
Wait, so I actually did get the spoon bread. I really wanted to try the spoon bread.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Well, it sounds good, but it had a flabby piece of bacon on top and literally a ball of butter that was still cold. Like, I would assume the idea is that the butter would melt like it's cornbread, and I felt like the cornbread lacked flavor.
Yeah.
But so that was very sad.
Well, the big question is, did you have the Papa cake?
I didn't. No, thank you.
I don't know who wants the Papa cake.
Yeah.
If there's one take-home message from any of the reviews that we've published about Flower and Garden, it's don't get the Papa cake.
It must be a delicacy over there.
Christopher Lombard. No, he doesn't. Christopher Lombard in the chat is asking how you eat a margarita with a spork. Obviously, he's not seen the commercial, so we'll have to play that for him tonight. We'll play that for him tonight, so you can learn how you eat margarita and many other things with Spike the Bee spork. All right, so yeah, I mean, I definitely think that especially as the crowds come back and the staffing levels do not come back at the same rate as the crowds come back, service is obviously going to suffer. And I think it does, and I think it has, and I've seen it. It sounds like you've seen it. The food, the level of quality of the food is not where it should be. There's plenty of places where you can see the drop-off in levels of service. So, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. There's only so much these poor cast members can do. I mean, everybody lives with the do more with less mantra, but there's only so far you can push somebody before they just physically can't do anything more. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of these cast members are probably pushed to their limits when the crowds like that we're seeing now are in the parks.
Jason, I actually did forget one funny story from Epcot. When I was waiting in line for Mexico, there were two gentlemen walking by, I guess not really Disney people, maybe locals, and the one gentleman turned to the other and he said, "What is that in the middle? Is that a ride?" He was referring to the ring. I forgot I put it in my notes on my phone, so I remembered. I nearly fell over because that is how amazing this thing. You look like you can ride it, but anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it sure does. It sure does. That's a good one. Is that a ride? All right, we're gonna take a quick break here before we come back. Just because everybody in the chat is really asking for this. So we'll be right back after this quick interlude.
When I find myself at Flower and Garden, looking for some food to eat, I gotta get a spork with Spike the Bee. 58 pallets of unsold units standing right in front of me. Here for his 5th straight festival, Spike the Bee. Spike the Bee, Spike the Bee, Spike the Bee, Spike the Bee. Perfect for any food type, Spike the Bee. And while it's good for soup and chili, he's also perfect for poutine and Tupelo honey spoon bread, Spike the Bee. Plastic forks and spoons are wasteful, and they can't ever hope to be that versatile festival flatware, Spike the Bee. Spike the Bee, Spike the Bee, Spike the Bee, yeah, Spike the Bee. For blood orange margaritas, Spike the Bee.
How do you meet up with a spork?
Spike the Bee, Spike the Bee, Spike the Bee, yeah, Spike the Bee. Disney hopes you'll finally purchase Spike the Bee.
On mute. There we go. There's your Spike the Bee commercial for this evening. Charlene in the chat wants to know, what is the price of Spike the Bee? I think he's $3. Somewhere between $2 and $3. It's pretty cheap. They might have reduced it now that they're trying to get rid of 52 pallets of them. But yeah, it's somewhere between $2 and $3. It's pretty cheap, and they have them at all the booths. I think
soon coming to Galaxy's Edge.
So there we go with Spike the Bee.
I love that Tom volunteered his merch storage at the end of that commercial. Let Eric shoot back there. When I saw that, I was like, "Oh, that's where Tom puts all his stuff."
If only we had that much space for Tom's merch storage. That's the unfortunate truth, is that we need that much space and we don't have it.
I feel like he opens a closet and just falls on him everywhere, and just.
He claims it's organized. He claims it's organized, but I don't know.
Is it all in his apartment, or does he have a storage unit? I feel like
he's got to have a storage unit. Right?
He does not have a storage unit. What he does have is a studio. So the part of the studio that you don't see on camera has got all kinds of stuff in it. He does have a 2-bedroom apartment, and the second bedroom is also storage. So he's got an entire bedroom with closets, and then all of the studio that's not dedicated to studio space is pretty much storage.
Just boxes of Tokyo merch.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So I'm looking at the chat now. Tom drew the line at getting a storage unit. He did, actually. He's like, I do not want a storage unit. Instead, he just wants a bigger studio space. So I think our studio's like 1,400 or 1,700 square feet now, and he's looking to upgrade to something in the neighborhood of 4,000 to 5,000 square feet.
Wow.
Oh, gee.
So
I'm not getting a storage unit. I'm just tripling the size of the studio.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Whatever you gotta tell yourself.
Well, I think the one stat I heard on a live stream one morning, it was a Sunday morning live stream. He was there with Pete and the crew, and they asked him how many pins he had, and he said somewhere in the range of like 20,000, and
It's
that just
gotta be
blew
more than
my
that.
mind.
I think it's more than 20,000. I really do.
Wow.
He's got to have more than 20,000. Like, I probably have 10 to 15,000. I think he's got to have more than 20,000.
No way.
Yeah.
No, does that include duplicates, do you think, or does he sell the duplicates?
No, he keeps them for trading. Because, pin trading is a
okay.
big thing
Yeah.
now with COVID, like all the
Jeez.
traders.
Yeah.
No, I don't know if he buys duplicates that much, honestly. I know he buys two, but he usually buys one for his cousin, so...
Well, and I know he buys the blind bags and stuff, so I assume...
Yeah, we have a lot of the
blind
blind bags. And we'll probably end up putting the duplicates from the blind bags on the prize wall.
Oh, okay.
For wigs. I
Sure.
have a big box of pins from my blind bag duplicates that we got to put up there too. So yeah, I mean it's at least good that when we get duplicates we have a way to get rid of them.
Yeah. I feel like the studio needs to become like half studio, half like museum at this point.
Well, that's kind of what it was supposed to be. But the
Okay.
museum, and there were like glass cabinets and things that people that would come in for the shows before the pandemic would be able to look at and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a nice display, like Haunted Mansion is in one cabinet, and
Yeah, I remember
Alien
that.
Encounter in one cabinet. But now that whole space is just kind of full of stuff. It's no longer a display
Gotcha.
area. But yeah, hopefully we'll get a new space sometime soon, within the next couple of months. I hope.
That'd be great.
Yeah, no, it would be awesome. We need it for sure. But all right,
No more
let's
fire
see.
alarms.
No more fire alarms. No more people in the parking lot smoking certain things. Places
Good old
not
Florida
the
locals.
best. Yeah, right. Let's get back to talk. Well, actually, let's get back to ranting about something else. I'm trying to think what else Shannon talked about that I would go on a rant about. I don't know. I'm not surprised most of what you said. Honestly, like most of your except for the guy thinking that the big harmonious ring was a ride. That's pretty funny. Everything else really, and I mean honestly, that doesn't surprise me either. But most of the things that you said don't surprise me for the most part. I think that's been
Now, what do you think about masks? So I was staying at the yacht club and walking from yacht club to Hollywood Studios. Now, I died walking with my mask on back in late August.
Yeah.
People don't do it anymore, I noticed on this trip.
They don't wear their masks.
I was the anomaly. No,
I mean,
I was the anomaly.
a lot of it is that you're on a outdoor pathway that's not super crowded, and there's no one there to check for your masks. And I mean that's almost a mile, that pathway. Probably from yacht club it is a mile. I mean that's a pretty good hike. That's a decent hike for people. And so honestly, if as long as there's not a whole ton of people walking there, I can't blame people for taking their mask off while they're walking.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with it at all. Like I'm just I don't like to break the rules. I'm afraid I'm going to get banned for life, so I wear my mask.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's
No.
absolutely ridiculous. And even when I went golfing, I went to Palm and Magnolia, and it's like a different world because you're actually interacting with cast members still there, and you don't have to wear your mask. No one has to wear a mask at the golf course.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, once you're out on the course, it doesn't really make sense to either. And
Yeah.
it's kind of the same as the water parks for the most part. Although Disney's water park rules are more strict than Universal's, but not by a whole lot, just because they can't be. But it's. I think all of this mask discussion and talk is going to go away soon. Once we get enough people vaccinated. Apparently by the 4th of July, I guess. So I don't know. But we'll see what happens. People in the chat were asking about the Hershey Park meetup. I don't have a date for it yet. A lot of it depends on COVID. So it's probably not going to be in the spring. We're probably going to wait a bit until later in the summer. I mean, I guess we could do 2 of them. We could do one in the spring if people really wanted to. I'm going to start like an email list. So I'll put a thing out for people to sign up, and then we'll just have like an email list where I can blast out, messages or surveys for like what what days people want and things like that, and who's interested. So it's just so I can get a better idea of who's going to be coming and what days and things are going to work for people. So keep a lookout for that in the coming week. Let me see. So somebody in the chat wants me to rant about California, Disneyland only going to be open for California locals. Here's the thing. I talked about this last week, that Disneyland isn't opening their hotels, right? And so the state of California doesn't want people to come in from other places. And Disneyland doesn't have their hotels open. So there's honestly no good reason for Disney to try to get people to come in from out of state, because they're not going to make money because their hotels aren't open. So they have to limit capacity. Now, they say it's like 15% or something, which I think is absurd, and it's never going to be 15%, because look at what they did in Florida. It was like 40%, and they claimed it was still 25%. So, there's a couple things. One is that there's enough locals that you'll hit that 15% cap immediately. 2 is that the hotels of the Disneyland Resort are not open yet, and so that's going to be an issue because Disney's not going to make any money. So if the parks are full, Disney doesn't care whether they're locals or not. Honestly, it doesn't make any difference. So. But it makes sense to not have the locals come, because then it makes sense to not have people out of state come, because then you're going to have these people that are going to complain, I came from, Minnesota and I can't get in the park because the park passes are full. We actually got an email from somebody that said their brother-in-law was like on his way to Florida and didn't realize they needed park passes, and it's like spring break week, so there's no park passes available.
No way.
Not even for resort guests. So they're like staying at a Disney resort
Wow.
and can't get into the parks. So, I mean, but that's exactly what's going to happen at Disneyland when it opens, right? That's exactly what's going to happen. And so it makes sense. It makes sense to have it only for Californians when it first opens. It's going to be interesting when the Grand Californian DVC opens on May 2nd, because they're going to have to open the parks for those DVC people that are staying at the Grand Californian, regardless if the parks are supposed to only be, Californians. They're going to let those in, I guarantee you, because those people that came and paid for DVC are not going to go there and not want to go into the park. So even if the Californian only policy is still in place on May 2nd, I'm pretty sure that if you're in the Grand Californian DVC, you're going to be able to get in. And my guess is that the Grand Californian DVC is going to be like a test to see, getting the hotels back open, because that's what they did in Florida. They opened all the DVCs as kind of a test to get cast members back and start getting guests back and slowly increase capacity before they open more hotels. And I think that's exactly what they're doing in California. So my guess is that when the other hotels at Disneyland, the Disneyland Hotel, the rest of the Grand Californian, and the Paradise Pier all reopen, that's when they're going to let people from out of state into the parks. Now, whether that's, end of May or end of July, I don't know. You never really know, but it's certainly going to be after May 2nd, so we got like 6 weeks yet to see how that goes and where things are in terms of COVID restrictions by May 2nd.
Well, now, Jason, you've been a longer term DVC member. Now, like by technicality, if you own DVC at Grand California, you're technically a pseudo resident of California.
You're not.
Because I know if you own DVC in Florida, you're a pseudo
But you're not.
Floridian.
But
Well,
you're
yeah.
not.
Well, what I'm saying is, like, I think your theory is going the right direction, because they're going to let DVC members in to Disneyland as long as they have the park pass, because they're technically
They're going to let
a resident
DVC
of
members.
California.
They're going to let DVC members into the parks simply because they can't have a Disneyland hotel open that's connected to a park and not
Yeah.
with people in it, right? Like that's
No, I agree.
That's if
No,
they do
yeah.
that, there's going to be all kinds of complaints if they do that. So, I mean, back in December, like back in December when they first were going to open Grand Californian before they pulled the plug on it at the last minute, and forced me to cancel my flights. We were at that point we were going there completely expecting that the parks were going to be closed. But if the parks are open, then people that are staying at a Disney hotel are going to absolutely be expecting to go into the parks. And obviously they'll need a park pass just like in Florida, but they're absolutely going to be expecting to go to the parks. Yeah.
No, and my point there was to say that I don't think Disneyland is going to need to change that narrative of only Californians until they open up non-connecting hotels.
And I would honestly say they still might say only Californians or people staying at a Disney hotel, right? I mean, that's
true.
Sort of maybe phase 2 of the phased reopening, is that they don't, you have to have a Disney hotel reservation to get in the parks. Otherwise, people staying at the Best Western across the street can't get in, obviously, unless they're California residents. But that's certainly a possibility too that I could see happening for sure.
And they might need to do that until they go above 15% capacity, because at that level, I'm not sure the exact numbers, but they're going to be those park passes are going to fly anyway.
They absolutely are. 15% is going to be very low, very very low.
Yeah. Especially how fast the tickets for the Taste of California Adventure, whatever it's called. People were waiting in the queues for hours for those tickets.
Yeah, but those tickets didn't.
They didn't put new dates up.
They didn't. Yeah, I mean, they did put more dates up. They didn't totally sell out for about 8 hours, which surprised me, honestly.
Well, I think part of that was the Disney infrastructure on the tech side. I don't think necessarily it was the
tickets didn't sell out for 8 hours because people were in the waiting room for 7 hours, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It was not. Yeah, it was. The quantity was going to be out the door. If Disney had their tech right, that window would have been much.
Could have gone much faster. I think it certainly could have. Yeah, I think it could have. But with Universal again. So here's another example of Universal taking the lead with reopening in California now, just like they did in Florida last summer. They're opening with their event before Disneyland is, and from everything that I've seen, it's going off really well. It's the crowd control is done very well, and it looks like there's not a big issue with anything, crowds or anything else like that. I mean, Knott's has been doing their little food events for a while now too. It's certainly obvious now. I mean, I think Disney has been saying all along, we could do this safely, and it wasn't until now that the parks in California have had a chance to prove that. But from everything I've seen, it looks like they're doing exactly that. And I'm glad they're reopening, and it'll be pretty exciting to go. I might not go out until Knott's reopens the park, because most things at Disneyland I've ridden or can ride in Florida. The only thing I would honestly go to Disneyland for that I can't do in Florida is like World of Color, but I don't see that coming back, at least not for the summer. So we'll see. But I would go to Knott's. I love Knott's. Knott's is fantastic. If I was in California, I'd be doing Knott's meetups instead of Hershey Park meetups. But let's talk about No APs in California. Yeah, CJ just put something in the chat that I forgot to mention. That no, so all the Californian annual passes are canceled, right? And that means when the Disneyland parks reopen, everybody is going to have to buy tickets. There's not an annual pass in existence. Everybody's going to have to buy tickets. That alone, I think, is honestly going to cut down on the number of locals that are just going to come and crowd the parks, because that was the whole point. And there was a really, it wasn't very well written, but there was an article that I read the other day. I want to say it was in some California newspaper. I mean, I read it online, but I think it was in like some San Francisco news outlet or something that said, the cancellation of all the Disneyland annual passes is something that Disney has, really needed to do years ago, and COVID finally gave them an excuse to do it. And I mean, COVID really is an excuse. Like, they didn't have to do it, regardless of whatever they say. They didn't have to do it, but they did it, and COVID is the excuse. But it's honestly something that needed to be done, because the Disneyland parks have been getting for, I don't know, at least like 5 years, 6, 7 years now. Things have just been getting so crowded. And the article said, and this is what I think is really hit the nail on the head. The article said that this problem really started happening when they came out with the monthly payment plan for locals, right? And so, it's the locals. The monthly payment plan allowed more people to be able to afford an annual pass, even though obviously the cost is the same. There's just something about human nature where you can't save $30 a month for a whole year and not spend it, but if you can pay $30 a month for an annual pass, then somehow you can afford it. So this article also speculated that when the passes do come back, there's not going to be monthly payment plans anymore, because that's what precipitated the predicament that we're in for the past 6 or 7 years, that the parks are just so overly mobbed, and it's just, it's an untenable situation, right? And I've said before on this show and other shows that I would pay much more for my annual pass if I was guaranteed a much better experience with less crowds in the parks. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if that happens in California. Mm-hmm. Because the passes there are cheaper than Florida. Obviously, there's the possibility that we lost Brian. There he is.
Sorry.
There certainly is the possibility of raising prices in California, and I think it's going to happen. I don't know how much. Obviously, they're going to go up, but it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is a trend we've been seeing in general, where we're like, Disney is pricing people out, and you wonder how much longer you can go, even with the new Star Wars hotel.
Well, I mean, so here's the question, right? Like, how else can Disney control crowds? How else can Disney keep the number of people that come to their parks lower while still making the same amount of money, because that's what their shareholders demand? Obviously, if they wanted to, if it wasn't a public company with shareholders that demand profits, they could just say, look, we're capping attendance at X, and you need a park pass, and that's it. And ticket prices are going to stay the same. But if they want to get rid of the park pass thing and make more money, then there's not in a capitalist society with a amenity that's limited in capacity but essentially available to everybody. There's really only one way to reduce demand, and that's to either increase supply or increase the price. Both of those will reduce demand, and increasing supply is not something they could do. not quickly, and certainly not to the capacity that they need to have, because they can't even do it in Florida. And so, the only other way they can do it to increase to decrease the number of people coming into the parks, but keep the revenue the same, is to increase the ticket price. And so it's going to happen. I think I guarantee that it's going to happen when those annual passes come back. I mean, we've seen the surveys and things like that with prices that are like $1,300. So, it's going to happen.
No, and yeah, and I think we are going to see prices increase significantly, just because there's so many more locals than Disney World. That's just the game down there. There's so many more, or over there. There's so many more locals that are there every week after work every day, and obviously you want to be able to make it worth the money to have an annual pass. But the amount that you're getting per visit that price is cheap. It's dirt cheap. People can do it for. If they put it in that perspective, they can go there every day for $900. I'm not sure what the actual price was prior to it going away, but you portion that out for, let's say 100 times in a year, you're paying $10 a trip. That's insane,
right?
And I think what we'll see for the locals, I think obviously the base annual pass will go up, but I think if Disney wants to offer that monthly payment plan, they need to treat it more like financing a car or a loan, in a way where if you want to go month to month in the rental world, then you have to pay additional fees on top of that to go month to month.
Right. Yeah.
And I think they don't want to definitely price all their locals out, but they definitely want to price out certain locals. Or if you want that month to month, you have to pay that premium.
Yeah, certainly. I think certainly having a service fee for the monthly payments is a good idea. I also think that they also talked about having passes that were limited, not in blackout dates, but limited in terms of like how many days you could use them in a given month or the year or whatever. And that makes some kind of sense, because if you think about it, right, like a park ticket is more than $100 for a day. If you buy a 5-day park ticket, it still works out to like $60 or $70 a day. And so if you're going to have a pass that's $400, that's the same price as a 5-day park pass, then maybe you should only get 6 or 7 days worth of admission out of that pass, right? It's honestly just like going back to the non-expiring multi-day tickets that they had in Florida, right? Like back in when they still had these multi-day tickets, you could buy a 10-day non-expiring ticket for like $600 or $700. But I mean, that's back when the park admission was like probably $80. But you bought a 10-day non-expiring ticket that included park hopping, and it was like $600, but you kind of locked that in, and it didn't expire. And so in some ways, that's better than an annual pass, because you pay that once, and you don't have to pay it again until you use up the ticket. And so it looks like they may be going to some sort of hybrid concept where you can buy an annual pass that's good for a year, but in reality, it's not an annual pass. It's more like a 10 or 15 or 20-day ticket that expires 1 year from the date of purchase. That's really what it is. It's not an annual pass. And if you make that ticket, right, so like if a day ticket is $100 and you can get it down to like $60 if you buy a 5-day ticket, then you price that 15 or 20-day ticket at $50 or maybe even $40 a day. A 15-day ticket at $50 a day is $750. That's on par with an annual pass, some of the levels. And if that gets you in 15 days a year with no blackout dates, that's probably something people would go for. And what that does is it gives people an affordable way to go to the park more than just a handful of days, but it's not an open-ended, unlimited kind of thing. And I think that's the problem, is the open-ended, unlimited kind of thing is what is filling up the parks. And certainly the people that go, 100 times a year are not spending as much on food as the people that go 5 times a year. I mean, Disney says that, and for the most part, I think it's true, whether they have data to back it up or not. But, if you're only going to go 10 or 15 days a year, you're actually much more likely to spend money on food or whatever than if you would go 100 times a year. Archfox's cost must include parking. Parking is kind of the wild card in all of this, because some of their passes include it and some don't, and I think it's actually kind of absurd not to include parking in a price of a pass. But I guess if people are going to take public transportation, then they don't need to pay for parking. So
yeah, and I think we'll still see this, like, in my mind, like a platinum pass where it's going to be $2,500, $3,000 to have.
They very well might still have.
They still need to have that, I think, because there's people that will pay it.
Yeah.
But for the people that want to still go to Disney often, they just need to find a way to make money off them more than just like $10 a trip.
Right. So either and I don't think they can really necessarily expect them to have, spend more on food and merchandise. So they just have to make it that the cost of entry on any given day is more than like $10.
Yeah.
Now, Jason, what do you think about Universal? They're doing their deal. They're only charging, $44 to $49, depending on what it is. They still have 5 meals that you can have for your taste of Universal or whatever it is, where Disney's charging $75, regardless of age. So if I've got a family of 4, not that I'd be taking my kids, but if 4 of us went, it'd be $300 to go to Disneyland, and it would be $150 to go to Universal. So is it Universal's play? Because Universal can't be making a whole ton of money off of this. Are they trying to chop into that AP kind of people that are upset and kind of angry and go, hey, for $50 I can go down the street to Universal and eat and still get 5 meals, and that's not a bad day. Even if I'm going out with just 2 adults, you're spending $100 to get through the door. You're going to eat 5 things each. If you indulge in a little bit of adult beverages, you're still probably walking out of there for under $200.
Yep.
I wonder if they're making that play. Otherwise, why wouldn't you charge $50? Like, why do the $49? Like, are you trying to build that goodwill with those annual pass holders, where you're trying to say, hey, like, we're over here if you ever want to stop on by? It seems like they're trying to take advantage of that opportunity, especially considering they're not going to be able to get to that 25% probably like Disneyland is, just because of the way the counties are in terms of going from red to yellow or whatever the counties are. So I wonder if it's a long-term play for them, where they say, hey, we're going to try to capitalize on the anger, people that are pissed off that have been annual pass holders for 30 years that are angry that they're now legacy pass holders. And I just wonder if that's a maybe I'm just giving them too much credit, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's the play,
So we went through the same discussion when Universal opened before Disney last summer. And everything that Universal has, and I'm talking about Florida, everything that Universal has done in Florida has followed that playbook. Right, they opened before Disney. They had annual pass deals where you could get 15 months for the price of 12. Then they came out with their Mardi Gras Food and Wine Festival that's superior to anything I've ever had at Epcot. They've got their tasting pass that's like ends up being $4 a taste for all of their booths. Some things are which are like normally priced at $12 to $14. So I think for sure Universal is absolutely following the same playbook and trying to capitalize on people who are not really wanting to pay what Disney is demanding. And I mean obviously the parks in Florida are much closer. and they're much more similar in terms of offerings. The Universal offerings in California are pretty significantly different. But that being said, I'm sure there's people in California, just like there were people in Florida, that never really considered going to Universal or haven't been in 5 or 10 years or never considered getting an annual pass. And Universal just wants to get them in the door so they can see what the offerings are and then make a compelling argument for getting an annual pass because it's going to be cheaper. And, I mean, if Universal plays this game too well, they're going to end up with the same problem that Disneyland had, that they're going to have too many annual passes. But I think that's a problem they would like to have because what it means is they have more people coming in and then they can, they can worry about that problem later. So it's if you look at value for the dollar, there's never been an argument that says Disney is a good value for the money that you spend, right? That hasn't been true for like 20 years. I just actually, honestly, I just found a receipt from, I want to say it's like 2005 or something, where I bought Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party tickets, and they were $38.
No way.
Yeah, like that's a good deal, right? That the argument that the value you get from a trip to Disney is worth the money hasn't been true for the past at least decade, if not more. And so I think Universal is trying to show people that there is absolutely better value for the money at Universal than at Disney. And that is absolutely happening in Florida. I guarantee that there's people in Florida that are going to Universal more often than they used to, because Universal's putting on a compelling product at a compelling price point that's just not it's a very different value proposition than what Disney is offering. I
mean, how are you charging $75 for a 3-year-old?
I mean, that's just
how is that? How is
grab.
and I get it. I'm not saying there's a lot of 3-year-olds that are going to be going to this, but you're not even attempting. Like, you've got all this goodwill, and you're just burning bridges and pissing people off.
Disney has been burning goodwill basically since I don't know, 5 years into Bob Iger's tenure here, right? Like, there was a lot of goodwill when Iger took over, and Iger slowly but surely, just tossed it to the wind, year after year. He tossed it to the wind, and every time something happened, like Disney hotels charge for parking, it's a money grab. It's clearly a money grab. There's no other way to explain it that it's a money grab. When that kind of stuff started happening, it's clear that Disney just doesn't care about the amount of goodwill that they've built up, and they're willing to just piss it away. And that's what they're doing. And they're doing it on both coasts, and Universal sees that, and Universal is basically saying, we're going to take advantage. We're going to build up our own goodwill because Disney obviously doesn't care.
And you wonder how much of an impact Nintendo World's going to have. Nintendo World is going to, all of a sudden, you're going to have a bunch of little kids that say, "Yeah, I want to go to that."
Yeah,
and now absolutely. If you're taking me off property, I mean, I do too.
Yeah,
and they're going to have all the kinks worked out. They're going to have all the things that they want to tweak and change, because that's what they do.
Yep.
And you're going to have a situation where people aren't going to care, because, again, to your point, Jason, if I'm only spending $150 for 4 of us to go, my level of expectation versus $150 and $300 are night and day.
Right.
And that's it. It's like, oh yeah, it was only $150, but we walked out of there for $250, and we had to get an Uber to get back to our hotel because we had such a great time. Like, I don't think that people are really, the people that are in charge are so worried about the near term and the near term and the near term. And the problem is there's nobody that's there long term that's looking at, okay, what are we looking at in 10 years and 15 years and 20 years? Like we talked about the DVC stuff. Why would you ever get into DVC? We just go resale. Well, there's so many resale points out there at such a cheap level. We stay at deluxe resorts for the price of values. We do it nonstop because people just want to try to pay their maintenance fees, and it's crazy. They just want to cover their costs, and it allows us, a family like ours that would never be able to stay at a deluxe to stay on a monorail resort, because why would we stay at a value resort? We'd be foolish not to at that point.
Absolutely.
So,
and the price of the value resorts nowadays is like absurdity.
It's ridiculous. Oh god.
Yeah.
But yeah, you brought up Super Nintendo World, and that's a great point because that's going to open in California soon, right? And so it might also be the idea of Universal in California to say, all right, this new land is opening, and people are going to want to come. Let's get them roped in. Let's get them to buy that annual pass. That's not going to happen in Florida for a number of years yet. So, but it's imminent in California, and that's another thing that I think, Universal has up their sleeve that Disney has nothing at all to play against that.
Ratatouille.
And
no. Ratatouille's not going to do it. Well, I mean, in California, all you've got is Runaway Railway that's going to open at Disneyland, right? And I mean, enough people have been to Florida that Runaway Railway is probably going to keep more people away from Disneyland than draw into Disneyland. Right? Because the smart ones are going to say, this ride sucks, and it's just going to make the whole place crowded. I'm not even going to go. But, but in California, that's the only thing that Disney has. I mean, you're going to have, think about it, Super Nintendo World is going to open, and the only thing Disneyland is going to open opposite that is Runaway Railway. That's got to be, I mean, that's like that's the exact opposite of like what Disney and Universal were 20 years ago. When you think about it, like that's Universal, like 20 years ago, well, 20 years ago, Islands of Adventure just opened. Let's say 15 years ago, like 2004, 2005, you had Soarin' open, you had Expedition Everest open, Disney had a lot of stuff opening. And what did Universal have? They had, like, Transformers. Like a screen-based attraction that nobody wanted. And the fact that it's exactly flip-flopped now in California, and that Disney has a screen-based attraction that no one wants, and Universal has a whole other land based on Super Nintendo is it just shows you how far the upper levels of Disney management have strayed from what their core, winning formula had been for the past 50 years. It's just they're totally in the wrong direction.
Yeah. I'm not even sure that Guardians and Ratatouille are even going to do it, because I was at Epcot, and it was so sad to see Test Track. My husband and I waited in line for like 10 minutes, and we're like, I've never seen the line. It actually wrapped to another whole backstage area to the left, which I've never seen before. But it was pathetic in a way, because people don't have anything else to do. And I think to myself, will Guardians and Ratatouille help that? No, this is why we need to stretch Flower and Garden from March 3rd or March 4th to the end of July, because that's
so you look at Ratatouille is going to be more underwhelming than Runaway Railway, right? And a lot of people like Runaway Railway. Even people that like Runaway Railway aren't going to like Ratatouille, because it's honestly a cheaper and worse sort of ride that's very similar, but just not as good. And Guardians is going to be it's going to be like Mission Space. So Mission Space was like, oh, everybody's going to want to come ride this. It's the greatest new thing. And then people went on and like half of them got sick and never rode it again. I think Guardians is going to do that. And so again,
Yeah, probably.
so again, you have Super Mario World's not going to open in Florida for a long time, but Disney has got Ratatouille, and then they've got Guardians, and then they've got Tron. So you've got one ride that's a family ride that's not any good, and then you've got 2 roller coasters. There's no family-friendly ride that's going to attract people to come and bring their whole family, like a Soarin' or something like that everyone can ride, and there's high re-rideability. There's none of that. There's none of that under construction at Disney, and it's they're not going to have it. I mean, they've already blown whatever bump they'd get out of Runaway Railway because it opened and then the parks closed. So Runaway Railways, they still try to market it, but that's kind of old news now. And yeah, Guardians is going to be popular, but it's not going to be popular with the family crowd. It's going to be popular with the teens and young adults, and it's going to be another Mission Space. Honestly, it's going to be. It's maybe a little better than Mission Space because it's a roller coaster and people like roller coasters, but it's not going to do for Epcot what Soarin' did. It's going to be much more aligned to do for Epcot what Mission Space did. It's not going to do what Frozen did.
I think I have higher expectations. I think it will be great and mind-blowing. But like you guys have already said, I am already at the point where I'm not sure how much more of Expedition Everest I can take the older I get. And I feel like Guardians may be a one and done. I
think Guardians is going to be more tolerable than Everest. Like I pretty much can't take Everest at all. Like I haven't been on that ride in probably 2.5 years. I think Guardians is going to be not as intense of an experience. Now, Tron, on the other hand, that's pretty intense. Tron doesn't even... I mean, none of them go upside down, right? But Everest is pretty intense, especially with the backwards portion. Guardians, I think, is going to have more things to look at because that's kind of how it's designed. So there's going to be plenty of places where you're going to go slow and the cars are going to rotate so you can look at things interspersed with the roller coaster stuff. And Tron is Tron is kind of a wild card because some people are going to love it and some people are going to hate it. And how that plays out is kind of hard to predict. The closest thing to Tron is Hagrid's, but even then, Tron is different enough from Hagrid's that there's going to be different people that like it more or less than Hagrid's.
And I think Guardians, especially if you're a Marvel fan, it's going to be an enjoyable ride. I think I feel pretty safe with the Guardians IP, especially seeing what they did to Tower in California. They at least know how to handle that IP and transforming a seemingly screen-based attraction into something that's exciting with those characters. I think those characters are easy to keep up with, or able to keep up with a faster pace of ride, which we're going to see from Gardens and the Rewind coaster. But I think overall, this discussion, the Universal versus Disney discussion, and I'm seeing it in the chat, and I often see it in the comment sections whenever we get into the Universal discussion as well. Universal is like let's say a state fair versus Disney. Like Disney's superior, and we all wouldn't be here unless we didn't agree with that. Like we all love Disney. That's why we're on this show. That's why we spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars every year because we love Disney. We love the IP. But the thing that I'm seeing, and I think, yes, Universal isn't at this place that Disney is. Disney's superior, all-encompassing. Hotels are better. The experience is generally better at this point.
I don't even know if the hotels are better, to be honest. But okay, go ahead.
Really?
Yeah, I
but
mean,
what I'm saying is I think Universal's playing the long game at this point, where I was thinking about this before the show because I figured Universal would come up and we'd have this discussion, is that Disney was, when I think about in let's say steakhouses. So let's say Disney was the first ever steakhouse, the best ever steakhouse. They served Wagyu, the most like highest grade prime. They used truffles and things like that, like to merely amp up the experience. And then this other restaurant, this other steakhouse came in and was serving very low quality meat.
Let's
things
call
like
it
that.
Ponderosa.
Yeah, let's say Ruth's Chris versus Ponderosa, but now Ponderosa is saying, "Hey, I want to be closer to what Ruth Chris is doing," and they start bringing in better meat. But at the same time, this Ruth's Chris is no longer using truffle; they're using truffle oil, something a little more inferior, where they're bringing those more screen-based rides and not doing what they have always been known for, of really beautiful animatronics, really great storytelling in the rides. They're really relying on some techniques that Ponderosa had pioneered in a certain degree of really making screen-based attractions really popular, or at least being that being their bread and butter. I think we all still think, I still think that Disney is better, and at least I'm going to argue for that at this point. But I think in the long term, like you said, Disney executives are totally just throwing away an opportunity to really cultivate that nostalgia. And I think they are living on nostalgia right now, and they're not really living on developing quality experiences, where Universal wants to take over Big Brother. The whole point of business is to take out the competition. And obviously Disney is a behemoth in the parks realm. But if you look internally, you see that other companies are doing better with OLC. Like, I think that if Disney wants a long-term success in the parks industry, they need to either just totally divert all creative and the business side of the parks to OLC, or maybe bring them in even closer to the parks domestically or stateside, because Universal's playing the long game, and I think we're going to see a dramatic shift. I think part of the reason for their price decreases, at least compared to what Disney's doing, is they're trying to bring more people in. All of us are here. We love Disney because we had those experiences as young people. We had those experiences as kids. And if mom and dad start taking the kids more to Universal than to Disney, those kids are going to grow up and all the memories are going to be at Universal and not at Disney. And Universal has some exciting IPs. Harry Potter is one of those IPs I think it will last a lifetime, or last generations, same as Star Wars and same as some of the IPs that Disney has. And same thing with Nintendo. Like, obviously some of the rides at Super Nintendo World are disappointing, but I think they're going to work out the kinks coming here stateside to make, especially at least the Mario Kart attraction a little more exciting than what we've seen so far. But I think Universal's playing the long game, and at least when I have these discussions, I'm not talking about Universal right now. I don't think Universal is better than Disney by, at least attraction-wise right now. But I think if they keep playing this long game, what we're seeing between, if we look at Tron and Velocicoaster, Tron, in my opinion, isn't very much of a themed roller coaster. All it is some blue lights and you're in a themed car. But you see what they're doing with Velocicoaster. The whole area is themed up to the wazoo. They're really kind of upgrading and adding to that, I guess now, Jurassic World aesthetic. You feel like you're surrounded by what we're seeing with the audio outside of the walls, outside of the attraction, that you hear the raptors screeching inside. I don't think there's much theming in the Tron roller coaster at all, and they're developing a really nice themed roller coaster. Again, it's just a roller coaster, but at least there's theming, and you feel like you're stepping into a new world. Where Tron, it seems boring to me. Everything I've seen from Tron, I haven't ridden it yet. I know, Jason, you've been there and ridden it a few times, but it seems like a boring roller coaster other than the novelty of being on a bike. But yet again, we've already seen that with Hagrid's. So yeah, I think Universal's been, like I said, the game here.
That actually reminds me of a meme I saw on the internet recently. It was really funny. And, you know, the thing that's going around right now is March 2020 versus March 2021. And the March 2020 was Space Mountain and Everest as show buildings. And then it showed Tron and Guardians. And my heart broke into a million pieces because it's so true and sad.
It is. It absolutely is. Yeah. Just to comment on what you said, Matt, a little bit. So Tron in Florida is going to suffer from being wedged into a place that wasn't designed for it. In or in Shanghai, Tron is the anchor of an entire land that was designed around Tron. It's visually stunning. There's not much to the land. I mean, there's a restaurant and another ride, but it's visually stunning when you enter and see the entire land, you know, lit up and looking like a cohesive whole. Tron in Florida is not going to have that, and in fact, it's going to be so hidden in the back of Tomorrowland that I don't think any view of Tron in Florida is going to be as sort of majestic as it is in Shanghai. You know, the culture is pretty much going to be identical, but Shanghai has an amazing, you know, approach to it with the canopy and everything else, and you're just not going to get that in Florida because of where it's shoved in the back. You'll get a little bit of it when you get past Space Mountain and actually sort of get to the entrance of Tron, but in Shanghai, you get the whole visual from a distance. And think about it like, you know, you enter World Showcase and you have this big wide vista of World Showcase. That's Shanghai. And then in Florida, you enter World Showcase, but you can't see anything because there's this big junk in the way. And it's only when you get in front of the pavilion that you can see the country, and that's going to be what Tron is in Florida. And so that's not even talking about the ride itself. The ride itself I like it better than Hagrid's, honestly. I mean, Hagrid's has some interesting, you know, things that are novel. Like the sidecar is kind of novel. The motorbike is kind of novel. The motorbike on Tron is more fun. Because you're really hunched over on a cycle as opposed to you know, sort of sitting upright on a motorcycle. So I think the ride vehicle in Tron is more fun. It makes the experience more fun. It doesn't have anything like you know, stops or backwards or whatever that Hagrid's has. But I don't know that it needs that either, honestly. It's a fun ride. It's not anything more than a fun ride. But it is fun. But you lose out on the visually stunning aspect of it because you're not going to see it from a distance in Florida. So that's the problem that Tron's going to have in Florida. That, you know, it's a fun ride, but you don't get the visuals that you get in Shanghai.
Yeah, but also again, while on the ride though, compare Hagrid's to Tron, all you see is screens.
Yeah, I mean,
am I wrong?
You're not. I mean, you're outdoors a lot, so you honestly see a lot of the outdoors, which you do on Hagrid's too. I mean, Hagrid's has what, like 2 animatronics. They're not great animatronics. They're kind of funny animatronics more than anything else. And I mean, yeah, it has a storyline to it, but Tron has a storyline too. The problem is that no one knows what the storyline of Tron is because nobody's seen the original movie, right? You know, I think the original movie's great, but it's hard to follow. But it just has a visually unique look to it, and that's what they capitalized on for the ride. And so it's kind of like, you know, it's. I think it'll be fine. It's not going to be like a Splash Mountain that is going to be this thing that draws people and you see from a distance. Or even Big Thunder Mountain, right? Like Big Thunder Mountain, like the approach to Big Thunder Mountain, you walk up the hill and then you get up there and you see the whole mountain laid out. I mean, that's pretty visually expansive, and you're just not going to get that with Tron because of where it's situated, and it's unfortunate because it really does look cool in Shanghai, especially at night. It looks awesome, and you're going to miss out on that in Florida.
Well, that's my thought as well. Is like, for those who've been to Shanghai and things like that, is that just gonna be the narrative? Is like, oh, it looks beautiful in Shanghai, and I think I'm excited for Tron. I think it's a new thing in Magic Kingdom for me is great. But is that what we needed in Magic Kingdom, especially in Tomorrowland? If we're not gonna get those really beautiful vistas, I think you're gonna see much more of Tron from
Fantasy,
like Dumbo in that area,
the Barnstormer,
and you are
sure.
from Tomorrowland,
but also part of it is that if you can't see Tron from a distance, you lose a lot, right? So in Shanghai, it's at the back of the land, but you can see it from the entrance to the land. You're not going to see it from that same distance anywhere in Florida, so you're not going to get the big picture that you do in Shanghai.
I think it's alludes to that landmark style where like the landmark of Tomorrowland is always, I think, will remain Space Mountain. But I think if we're looking at like what added to the theming of the land, I think Hagrid's did a really great job of it's the Forbidden Forest. It added something to it. I think the queue is beautiful in there as well. Whereas I think for just to say that like Tron has a really great exterior, but the interior, it's a fun roller coaster. But what we want from Disney is storytelling, and I think Hagrid's has a story in general.
Hagrid's absolutely has more of that than Tron will. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Nope.
And if it's just a screen-based coaster without a story, or at least most of us who haven't seen Tron, at least the original Tron, if you haven't seen those things, you're not going to have an idea what's going on. Where Hagrid's, right now at least, Hagrid's a very notable, iconic figure, and just by going through the queue, you know you're entering in this new world. You're entering into the Forbidden Forest and taking on this journey with Hagrid, whereas you're on a digital grid with bikes.
Yeah.
And again, it's all screen-based, and there's no story, and it's just to say that the structure is beautiful, but if the ride is nothing special, then why do we need it in Florida?
Right. Yeah. I just have to make a comment because Desi is in the chat, and she said Hagrid's has a terrible name. Oh my Lord! I mean, yeah.
It's a mouthful.
It's kind of. Well, it's not only a mouthful. I just thought she thought Hagrid's was a bad name because Hagrid's doesn't sound like the most friendly. I mean, he's not the most friendly kind of guy when you look at him, right? In the movies, he's like this big behemoth of a figure that's like sort of scary looking.
Oh, he's a big teddy bear.
Well, he is after you get to know him, right? But he's scary at the beginning. But yeah, I think for sure, for a ride that was sandwiched into an existing spot in a park, Hagrid's is absolutely better, well done, more better. It's better. It's done well versus Tron. Tron is sort of sandwiched in. They honestly would have done better to get rid of Speedway altogether and put Tron in the orientation that it should be, where it is a landmark that you see, and it is the visually stunning piece in Tomorrowland. It could certainly overtake Space Mountain as the most visually stunning piece of Tomorrowland if you could see it. But then we wouldn't get Speedway commentary, K-Jack says. That's very true.
Yeah, I love the Speedway commentary.
That's very true. But yeah, I think from your perspective on what Universal is, I mean, Universal in the 2000s, even when Islands of Adventure first opened, I mean, Islands of Adventure wasn't, the greatest theme park known to man when it opened. It was good. It was visually stunning. It didn't have a lot of amazing rides, I don't think. I mean, it had a log flume. It had a river rapids ride. It had a big steep log flume. It had, what else did it have? It had the Dueling Dragons coaster. And then it had like Doctor Doom's Fearfall, which is just a carbon copy drop tower ride. Spider-Man was sort of the headliner of the park at that point, because it was, even though it was screen based, it was a sort of new technology that they used very, very well, to very good effect. So to be honest, Islands wasn't a park with great rides, but it was very visually appealing, mostly because it was built by Imagineers. But it had some really inventive things. Like, it had Spider-Man, it had Poseidon's Fury, and people are all like, not everybody likes Poseidon's Fury. I think it's amazing because it's not something that you can experience anywhere else. It's totally different. It may not be the most exciting attraction there is, but if the most exciting attraction there is a roller coaster, those are a dime a dozen all over the place. Poseidon's Fury is something that's amazingly unique. And so, but then they put all of Harry Potter Land and spread it between the two parks, and now you've got a very compelling place that people know and love from the books, and they did a really, really good job with it. They did an amazing job with it, and now they're doing that amazing job with Jurassic Park. Like, Jurassic Park is my favorite movie, and I love going to Jurassic Park in Islands of Adventure, and I wish it had better attractions. River Adventure is fun, but it's not a great ride. But now they're getting Velocicoaster, and they're really, kicking it up a notch in terms of the theming and everything in that land, and I'm so excited. And Disney could do the same thing with Tomorrowland, like they could overlay all of Tomorrowland with this Tron sort of theme to tie it into the Tron coaster, sort of like Universal is doing a lot of theming and additions based on Jurassic Park in that land to tie it into the Jurassic Velocicoaster. But they're not. I mean, they're just sticking it in the back, and they're not doing anything else to the entire land. So it's
that was always the thing, wasn't it? I mean, Universal was sort of like these weird lands that didn't relate to each other. I remember when I first went, when my cousin was working down there, and he literally was a team member for a long time, and he took me on all the rides and everything. And I remember he said when they did the Spider-Man ride, it was $1 million per car. The car itself was $1 million, and the ride system itself, they said they spent huge money on it.
Yeah.
And the idea was they had this master plan of down the road of like 5 to 10 years, as long as attendance grew, they were gonna do Harry Potter World, and then they had phases of that based on how the response was.
Yeah.
So they had those long-term plans. It just seems like now they're just trying to tie everything together. They realized that they were always like, you were walking over to see The Simpsons, and then you walk over here, and then you saw like SpongeBob. You're like, what the? Like nothing made any sense.
Yeah. I mean, in their defense, though, it's hard to do that anywhere, honestly, right? So think about the transition from Fantasyland to Liberty Square. There's nothing that's thematically connecting between Fantasyland and Liberty Square, and that's why there's that really narrow little underpass right at Memento Mori, because they don't want you to see anything on the other side of that until you're there, because there's nothing thematically connecting those two lands. And it's the same with, it's the only thing that is sort of a thematic connection is Adventureland to Frontierland. And that's just because they have like the stucco things that are sort of both, right? But Fantasyland to Tomorrowland, there's no thematic connection there either. You know, I mean, you go from the Mad Tea Party to the Speedway. So it's, I think people who say that, you know, Universal is just a bunch of stuff shoved together that doesn't make sense. Magic Kingdom is too. I mean, honestly, Epcot was the best example of that kind of design, where the whole park was a cohesive theme, or two themes, if you know, with. But you had Future World and you had World Showcase, and there were two very cohesive themes unto themselves, and then they just happened to be in the same park. Or MGM Studios, where you had the whole park was themed after a movie studio. That was a very cohesively designed park. But Magic Kingdom's not, Universal's not, and Islands is not. So it's I'm kind of like, okay, whatever. You know, if they execute them all well, which they did in Walt Disney World, and they did in Islands of Adventure, you know, if they execute them well, and you make the transitions at least not jarring, that's about as much as we could expect, I think.
Yeah, I also wanted to add, when it comes to Universal, like now, you know, I watch a lot of live streams now that I'm home more, and I watch all sorts of live streams, Disney and Universal alike. And I personally have not been to Universal since I was a teenager, probably, and I have been itching to go back. And you know, they're really making an effort to pick up where Disney is lacking now, especially in terms of live entertainment. I've been shocked by the live that they've had over the last year. And I'm like, wow, so Disney's erasing all their live entertainment. I want to go to Universal now because they have the live entertainment. You know, and Universal is not shy of taking jabs on their social media account, you know, posting that they basically painted 55-gallon drums and put a top on and said, here, you don't need to eat on a garbage can at a festival. So, you know, they're really working their ways.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent example of the, you know, Ruth Chris versus Ponderosa analogy that Matt had. That, you know, Ruth Chris says, oh, we don't need these truffles because no one really cares, so we're just going to use like this artificial flavored truffle oil. And Universal's like, well, I think people did like the truffles, and, you know, maybe we're just Ponderosa, but imagine how much more people would think of us if we brought truffles in. And they brought them in. And now you see what people think of entertainment. It's exactly the same thing. It's Disney is not playing the long-term game. They're cutting things to save money in the short term, and Universal is capitalizing on that and gaining a heck of a lot of goodwill by having absolutely having things that Disney doesn't have, right? Like Universal forever was the sort of playing second fiddle, and now Universal can actually come out and say, hey, we have things that Disney doesn't have, right? Like they tried to say that with Spider-Man, and they tried to say that with this or that or whatever, but from a guest satisfaction point of view, the live entertainment in the parks, Universal is absolutely killing it, while Disney is literally killing it. They're cutting it off, you know, they're cutting it off to spite their face, whereas Universal is adding and doing a really good job with it, and it makes a lot of difference for some people.
Yeah, and I would say, from the perspective of rides, I think if you look at Disney versus Universal, you can name so many rides from Disney: Splash Mountain, Space Mountain. There's so many different rides you can say those are iconic. When you think of theme park attractions, like those are the ones you look at, Pirates, as the all-time classics. But Universal, you can't really say that. Obviously, you have Spider-Man, which is kind of this epic foray into kind of a new ride system. Like that's, I would say, when you think of iconic attractions at Universal that have something that you can't touch in the long term, they have very few rides you can't touch, and people, if you touched many of those rides, people are like, okay, that's fine. You're putting something in different.
But I think you're making a comparison.
Disney have like those iconic attractions that last forever.
You're making a comparison that I don't think is really fair, because like Universal in Orlando opened in 1990,
Sure.
right? Something like that, right? So I want you to not count any attractions that opened at Disney before 1990 and make that same argument.
Yeah, no, and you make a really good point. And what was kind of going on there is that what Universal's lacking in iconic rides, I think they're doing much better in themed lands, at least new themed lands.
I mean, they're doing better in new themed rides too.
Yeah, that's fair too.
Right? Like if you want to,
the constant comparison. Go ahead.
If you want to talk about like what attractions, I mean, Universal and this is a point that I totally agree with, that Universal really honestly made a mistake when they got rid of Jaws and Confrontation, because those were classic, right? They still have E.T., but that's the last classic left. But Jaws and Confrontation were classic attractions that they should have never gotten rid of. But then again, you've got Disney getting rid of Great Movie Ride. It's the same thing. I guarantee you, 10 years down the road, people are going to look back and say it was a huge mistake to get rid of Great Movie Ride. I mean, people are going to look back and say it was a huge mistake to get rid of the Studio Tram Tour. And I think, and I've said this before, my prediction is that people are going to look back and say Disney made a huge mistake cramming Star Wars into studios instead of building its own park. That's what they're going to say, because they took so much away from studios to do it, and what they put back into studios with the Star Wars land that they have is really not enough to make up for what they take away. So, there's been mistakes made, and I think Universal honestly probably would admit that getting rid of Jaws was a mistake. And it might take another 10 years before, I think Disney leadership would probably admit that getting rid of Great Movie Ride was a mistake. But so everybody makes mistakes, but Universal has enough attractions that have come in since then, like all of the Harry Potter attractions, that people sort of maybe, not that they don't miss Jaws, but that they are satisfied that